Once again, my really rather prioritized schedule has been interrupted by the latest stupidity engrossing your world, and yet dragged to my attention here. And this time, it comes to us via your hit parade, in the form of some top 40 runaway hit. Try that in a small town. Now pray, let us keep this short and simple, because frankly, I have more pressing matters which require my attention. Since I do not have very much positive to say about this song, it is very important that I clarify to you up front that which you will be hearing will not be the insights coming from what would be termed a white liberal. You see, the fact that the majority of you have taken terms like liberal and conservative and you've twisted them around into whatever pejorative meaning you just happen to like today, that doesn't matter to me. Your meanings become meaningless, for any number of reasons, true, but for starters, candidly, for those of you who are called or who sanctimoniously call yourselves liberal, I perceive very little to no liberality in most of what you say and in a lot of what you do. Matter of fact, I see the complete polar opposite in a lot of what you say and do. And as for those ass-backward barnyard fools that you call conservatives, ha! Let me tell you something. There is nothing remotely conservative about any of those morons or jackasses. Not a thing. What is the point of this little vocabulary lesson? To reiterate to you that the application of your soapbox guidelines does not in turn apply to me. Let me tell you a quick story. I was reading this account of what some journalist labeled a liberal gathering. A bunch of white liberals and some older black luminaries, civil rights advocates, writers, entertainers. And apparently one of the white liberals had remarked to an older black celebrity something to the effect of, "Oh, we white folks, we have all wronged you black folks. We cannot even begin to apologize. Where can we even start to make it up to you? We truly wish to make things right," and so on and so forth. And the older black celebrity responded by saying, basically, "Yeah, well, if that's really what you're planning to do, you've got a lot to make up for. You've got a couple thousand years worth of wrongs to address. You better get busy, because if you want to make things right, you've got a lot of work ahead of you." And the white liberal nods and sighs and replies, Yeah, we do. We've got a long, long road ahead of us. When I read that account, I tell you honestly, hand to God from the heart, from the gut, here is what my immediate, instinctual reaction truly was. Wow. That is going to be a lot of work. That is going to be a massive undertaking. That is going to be an incredibly, unbelievably uphill battle for white liberals everywhere. Jeez. I sure am glad I'm not one of you guys. And it was then that the enlightenment, that the revelation was confirmed. As egalitarian as my mindset is, as liberated as my mentality is, as much of a free thinker as I am not what would be called, and therefore will not be called, a white liberal. I am telling you this so that you will henceforth know, for the record, that anything that I ever say to you, anything that I go on to share with you, anything that I reveal to you, anything at all, no matter what it is, know that it is not coming from a white liberal. Now then, to the point at hand. Say again?
Well, if you're not a white liberal like the rest
of us. What are you then? I am an individual, independent, free agent who renounces your childish labels, who has long since understood that there is an inestimably long struggle ahead of us, who willingly undertakes the responsibility of engaging in this struggle, and who does not need the likes of you presuming to dictate to me your precious ideas about colors and not coloring outside of the lines. White liberal. I'm not even white, for God's sake, irrespective of what your perceptions of my complexion might be. Look, may we please get to the matter at hand, this ridiculous song that has you all up in arms? As I said in the beginning, let's try to keep this short and simple. Well, in short, simply speaking, what a lousy song. There's virtually no melody to speak of at all. The lyrics are crude and redundant. And the style, that song is the poster child epitome of the thing known as young country. Young country. The biggest, most sickening aberration ever to crawl out of the shadows of the grand old Opry. I have neither the words nor the energy today even to approach the autopsy of what happened. I also don't have the time. Suffice it to say that that music manages to sound even worse than most of yours. But our purpose here and now is not the musical merit of this song, but its content and its intent, its import, and above all, its impact upon you, upon society, upon the country, and so forth. Now, here again we depart from your equation, because you see, I actually took the trouble of listening to the song in its entirety. I then watched the music video from start to finish. I then hunted down a copy of the lyrics, and I read them all to the letter. It's called taking the time and making the effort to find out what the other guy is trying to say. You might want to give it a whirl someday. Now, lyrically, there really isn't anything overtly racist or racially prejudiced about this song. It is largely a crass, somewhat bucolic showcasing of the sense of community and solidarity which one often can and hopefully will find at a provincial small-town level. It emphasizes taking care of our own, a concept with which you, as punks and skins, should be familiar. I myself am no stranger to the philosophy, having for years advocated that you do right by those you call your own. It is, however, a bombastically nationalistic presentation, clearly designed to appeal to the extreme jingoistic factions in the audience. But the deal breaker is in the backdrop of this pyrotechnically juvenile music video. That old courthouse in the background, that is where the racist angle emerges. And how in the hell this singer and his cohorts are going to account for that should prove to be very amusing indeed. Albeit in a profoundly unhumorous way. It all puts me in mind of Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird, and wise, kindly old Atticus Finch, who we all thought was a living saint, and who then compelled us all to take a second look, all these years later. For you see, It is that racist angle which we are confronting here today. And believe you me, when you hear the angle from which I am going to address that angle, you will very understandably think that I have maneuvered all of us right into the Twilight Zone. You're close. It is not the Twilight Zone, neither is it the Outer Limits, but it is something very, very comparable. Do you all remember back in the 50s and the 60s, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and then later the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, the ponderous theme song, silhouettes, the grandiloquent host appearing to bid us all good evening. Now, what you might not remember, or what you might not have known in the first place, is that in tandem with the television program, there was also a monthly periodical, a companion piece of sorts, reminiscent of the Reader's Digest, condensed tales of terror, if you will. I happen to have a copy of it right here. Now, with somewhat ironic tragedy, this just happens to be dated November of 1963. For those of you who do not perceive either the irony or the tragedy of this date, stay tuned to an editorial which I will be very reluctantly presenting to you in November of this year. For now, let me tell you a little bit about a story which I happened to read in this volume many years ago. Now, like all of the other stories presented here, this short story has, right alongside of its title, this eerie little illustration. And I can recall that as I was reading the story and began to discern its plot and its direction, I kept flipping back to that little illustration. And then to the front cover. And then to the front page. And to the publisher's template in the front. Kept flipping back to it as if to confirm that yes, indeed, an established, syndicated East Coast publishing company with a complete editorial staff actually printed this submission, put it out there for the whole world to read. Now, the story is quite simple. I can take you through it quickly. It is situated in a small, small town hidden away in the deep, dark center of a state way down south. And the main character is a county attorney who is woken up in the middle of the night by a warning from the town sheriff telling him that there is an enemy on the way into town. For all intents and purposes, this enemy are mafiosos, mobsters, gangsters. They're going county by county in order to take over the entire state, creating a sort of packed political machine. And they're finally getting to this one small county. And so he takes that call and he agrees to meet up with all these other fellows who live in this small town in order to deal with this encroaching enemy in the middle of the night. Now, paraphrastically, I will read you some of this here. I thought about our county. It's buried deep in the mountainous, sparsely populated southern part of the state, a real backwater. But the important thing about our county is that we could seal it off from the rest of the world as effectively as if it were on the moon, which is why all of the other counties were sending this outfit our way, to our county, to our small town. Now, I pulled into the driveway of the service station. It was closed, so was everything else in town. All of the others were waiting over in the deep shadowed courthouse lawn under the oak trees around the ancient courthouse. There were cars parked all along the block between where I sat and the courthouse. I could make out men headed that way on foot, one by one and in small groups. All were dressed as I would be in a minute. Black robes topped by black conical hoods. I got out of the car, put on robe and hood, and walked around the courthouse to meet up with the others. And basically, they converge, and eventually they confront the enemy coming into town, a group of 5. They take 4 of them, and they leave the 5th, the youngest member. They take him aside, And they say to him, I want you to take a message back to your bosses. Get it straight and tell them just what I tell you. Tell them not to send anyone else down here. Tell them to keep out of this state. The kid's mouth dropped open. He shook his head dazedly. I don't understand. The syndicate will. All right, you got 30 minutes to be out of this town and then on your way out of the state. And don't you come back. But what about the 4 others? This is pretty wild country around here. It's easy for 4 strangers to get lost in the hills and never be found again. That's all. Goodbye. We moved out slowly through the dark, deserted streets like a midnight funeral procession. That's just what we were. Now here is the image in question. Now, some of you might actually be saying, well, the Klan, they wear linens of white robes and white hoods, not black. That's true, except for the Nighthawks. The Nighthawks, an auxiliary of the various Claverns, whose purpose it is to take care of situations like this in the dark of night. They do wear black. So here you have it, a reputedly respectable, highly popular publication, ostensibly under the imprimatur of the sage and urbane Alfred Hitchcock himself, offers a wide mass distribution of a short story to men, women, children of all ages, black and white, to people everywhere who can come across a copy of this, a short story in which you do not even have to read between the lines in order to perceive the meaning. Don't try this in our small town, because if you do, this is how we are going to deal with you. A written account, told in the first person by a narrator who himself turns out to be a Klansman. Well, it's just a fictitious account. It's only a made-up story in a periodical. Well, that's just it. No, it isn't. The precedent had long since been established, and the follow-through has been bled into the pages of the history books. This came out in November of 1963. Don't you remember what happened scarcely 6 months later in the summer of 1964? Didn't you ever see that motion picture, Mississippi Burning? That wasn't a fictitious account. That wasn't a made-up story. Mississippi Burning. And this has the nerve to be entitled, To Stop a Fire. No. You see, kids, now we come to the synthesis. What has any of this got to do with some infantile song, which I only just got through telling you was not overtly racist? The element depicted in this short story is real. It is alive and it is thriving, and a song like that is a veritable musical endorsement. It's a love song serenade to the backwater bile and bilge of their poisonous creed to take care of their own kind by taking care of business in their own way, in their own small town. Oh, I know there's a lot of you who think that that element is dying out, is drastically diminished at least, or if nothing else has been driven underground. But you see, that's the catch. When it comes to a specimen like that, the sort who judges an out-of-towner not only by the color of the skin, but by the license plates of the cars that they drive. A specimen like that doesn't have to go underground at all. No. Not if he and his kind just happen to live in a small town.